My name is James Johnikin, and today I will be discussing what great principals do differently 18 Things That Matter by Todd Whitaker. And so I will be talking about chapter 4, which is titled Who is the Variable? And the reason why I chose this chapter is that as I was reading through it, there was a lot of information about reflection and self-reflection, and that got me thinking about my time as a athlete and a coach. And when after a tough loss, you always think about, hey, what could I have done differently that could have helped my team win? Or as a coach, what could I have done differently to put my athletes in a position to win this game? And so in my life, self-reflection has always been something that I've used, and so I figured, why not use that in my educational field and job as well. And so one quote, sorry, that really stood out to me was this quote by John Dewey, and it was that we do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. And so, as Whitaker dives into this chapter, he starts out with this section called Who is the Variable in the Classroom? And when he's in that section, he gives this story about if he's in a classroom with a group of principals, and he asks them this question. Um, Before school is starting, do you know which teacher is going to send the most students to the office this year? And all the principals raise their hand and they have the answer and know who is going to do that. And then he says, well, how do you guys know who is going to send the most students to the office? Like, you don't even have the student rosters yet. And he uses that to try and show that the teachers are the variable in the classroom. And he does the same thing with a group of teachers as well, ask them the same question, and they all know which teacher is going to do it. And again, he is using this question to try and show the teachers that they are the variable in the classroom. And he has this quote, and he says that great principals are going to make all teachers aware that they are the variables in the classroom. And then he goes on to try and give you a better picture of showing the teachers as the variable in the classroom. And he does it by illustrating a very good and effective teacher and a not so good non-effective teacher. And he poses this question. He says, if a effective teacher gives an assignment and the students do poorly, who are they going to blame? And the responses that he gets is always, well, they're going to blame themselves. And then he poses the same question about a non-effective teacher. And the answers that he gets are always things like, oh, they'll blame the kids, or not getting enough help from the administration, or the kids' home life, things that they can't control. And so he's using that to again drive home this idea of that the teacher is the variable in the classroom. And then doing that, he also asked this question: whose behavior can a teacher actually control in the classroom? And the only answer to that question is that the teacher can control their own. And so, again, he has a quote that says that, effective principals constantly make to where teachers accept responsibility and looking at themselves and what they can do better to make things better in their classroom instead of pointing the finger like that picture shows. And I know you're thinking, so I thought this book was about principals and what they do differently, not about teachers. Well, then Whitaker moves on and he asks this question, well, who is responsible for this school? And when um, you ask that question, if you ask that question to an effective principal, you are going to get the answer, well, I'm responsible for this school. And I think this quote right here by Whitaker really drives that home. And he says, great principals take responsibility for their own performance and all aspects of the school. And just like the teachers in those other scenarios, you may have the principal who is going to accept that responsibility and put everything on themselves, while you may also have a principal who is not and is going to again blame those outside things that they have no control over, like funding cuts and things of that nature. And then he uses this scenario just showing the importance of a good principal that I thought was just really cool. And he says, so he asks this question. He said, if you had a child and they're going to go into first grade in 2 years, and you have to enroll your student in that school now, 2 years before they go to school. But the only information you have is that one school has a weak faculty, but just appointed a very outstanding principal, while the other school has a strong staff, but hired a very poor principal. Now, if you had to decide today, the majority of the educators would probably respond that they would send their um, student to the school that just hired the um, great principal. Now, why would they do that? Don't they think that staff is important and plays a key role in the school? Well, yes, they do, but they believe that with the hiring of that great principal, that in those 2 years, that great principal is going to change what that school is like immensely. So just showing the importance of how important administrators are in their schools. So as I read through this, one of the questions that kind of came to myself was why is this self reflection so important? And as I began to research, about self reflection, I came across a book by John Dewey, which is called How We Think. And in that book, one thing that he says is that reflection involves not simply a sequence of ideas, but a consequence. And that quote just like grabbed me. It was like, yes, self reflection. Is great and all when you have those ideas, but it's not really reflection until you go and do something about it. So you make that change that needs to be done to, let's say you had a not good lesson or something, and you reflect on it, and then you make that change that's going to make that lesson so much better. And then um, And then Whitaker also has a quote when he talks about this inward looking and self reflection, and it was that this empowering approach raises the level of teacher efficacy, and it will eventually reach the students. And so, when he talks about that teacher efficacy, that made me think back to John Hattie's research and the effect size that teacher efficacy had on student achievement. And that effect size was 1.57, which is largely above the average effect size of 0.4. And so if you're raising the level of that teacher efficacy, then you are going to be raising that student achievement within your classroom or school, sorry. And so lastly, I just wanted to touch on some present and future implications from reading this chapter. And so the first is a thing called two-column journaling. And that is this idea where you are going to daily answer these questions. You have one side that is a what happened side, and then the other side is kind of more focused and what does that mean. So for instance, what did you notice about the kids today? And then you're going to respond with your answer. And then how will this change your tomorrow? So what change am I going to make now because of this? And there's just a list of questions there that you go back and forth, and that's kind of a daily thing. And so let's say you don't have time to do a daily reflection every single day. And so then you could go to this weekly reflection. And with the weekly reflection, there's a couple different ways that you could do it. You might want to use the same question for a few weeks through a unit. So focusing on one question, what choices have I given students this week? Or you may want to rotate questions each week just to keep it fresh. So maybe one week you may say, does my grade book reflect what students actually know and can do? Why or why not? How do I know this? Or what am I trying to accomplish with students this week, this unit, or this semester? So that's just a way to weekly reflect. And the last thing is micro teaching. Some people may know about this micro teaching from their time as a student teacher or even through the South Dakota Mentor program. But the steps for this is that so you're going to plan a lesson, okay? And then you're going to teach that lesson. And while you teach it, you're going to record yourself. And you're going to use that recording to go on to step 3, which is going to be observe and critique. And so you're going to do that self-reflection and come up with those ideas so that you can make those changes that need to be made. And then after you do that, you're going to replan. So maybe you get to teach that same lesson to a different group tomorrow. So maybe you replan for tomorrow, or you don't get a replan, or you don't get to teach it again until next year. So you're going to replan for how you're going to do that next year. And then you're going to reteach that lesson. And then again, while you reteach it, you are going to film yourself again to be able to reobserve and re-critique yourself again. So just this cycle of teach or plan, teach, observe and critique, and then do it again until maybe you get it right, or until you do get it right. And so those are maybe some things that I've thought about trying to implement within my own class. Really, that two-column journaling is especially, but then also as I move into an administrative role at some point in my career, maybe having the teachers within my school do some of those things, and even myself just reflecting daily on how things went, what could have went better, how I could have changed that. Just some thoughts that I had. And here are the references that I use for this activity.